emotions. So there's a high reactivity to negative ones, but not so much in the positive ones, meaning that because they're hypersensitive to negative memories, negative sensations, the reactivity of those negative emotions is a lot more prominent than the positive ones. So if we're born with this predisposition to being sensitive, paired then with this overly seeing the negative things in our lives, so whether that's because we're anxious or other factors, and then thirdly paired with our lack of effective strategies to deal with negative affect.
You're gonna make my head explode, so go away. You want me to drop dead right now and it's done? Just go away. I do not need you to tell me what to do. Just whatever. I don't. Honestly.
This could all bleed into causing an individual to then have affective instability.
That I understand PDA as well is a great gift. If you don't understand why something's triggering you, you can end up blaming it on other things. I might blame somebody else for how they've made me feel, whereas now I might understand that I'm not feeling bad because of what the other person said. I'm feeling bad because of my nervous system and how I react to it. So it's not actually their fault.
I remember you being miserable to me. Miserable.
You remember it that way, Henry. That doesn't mean that I was.
If that's my memory, then something happened.
I like to think of people with BPD as emotional burn victims. Any slight is incredibly painful, and it's really hard for us to get over it. And so when someone that we think is amazing and perfect does something that is hurtful to us in some way, then we immediately, because of our fear of abandonment, want to throw them out the door. We're like, I can't trust you, you're horrible, and you're all bad. We go from all good to all bad, hence the term splitting. And this, the petulant type, is where splitting would occur the most often. Those of us in this petulant type can also complain a lot, right? If we're having these mood swings and feeling really dysregulated, nothing's going to feel good, and we probably hate everything. So we can be that kind of whiny type person, and we can also be incredibly stubborn, not wanting to give at all, again, because we feel so dysregulated.
It was that long ago that you would treat me that way and speak to me that way and just discard people. It was so long ago.
Borderline clients perceive or experience emotional situations, including conflicts and other relational situations, more intensely than non. Happening here is that borderline clients might not necessarily be more emotionally reactive, but rather perceive situations as more threatening or distressing. So it might be a matter of perception as opposed to emotional reactivity. Now, this is an important finding, of course, because affective instability, that emotional reactivity component, is a crucial symptom criterion for borderline personality disorder.
It was that long ago that you would treat me that way and speak to me that way. For me to have it burned into my mind.
Remember why I yelled at you?
No.
Because I can't imagine why. I don't remember the situation, so.
I remember you being miserable to me. Miserable.
You remember it that way, Henry. That doesn't mean that I was.
If that's my memory, then something happened. If that's my memory, then something happened.
What do you mean if that's your memory, then something happened?
That something happened to make me think that way.
So you're saying that there's no way you could have misunderstood or perceived the situation incorrectly?
Day after day, month after month.
Is that that's not a possibility in your mind?
Do you think?
Is that not a possibility that you could have perceived the situation incorrectly? You could have thought that I had some miserable feelings towards you when that wasn't necessarily the case. You could have misunderstood my facial expression.
I've never heard the concept or idea of being addicted to a negative emotion. people talk to me about being addicted to dopamine and pleasure and, and all those things, and, like masturbation and sugar, but the thought of being addicted to a negative emotion is
what do people do when they feel an emotion? What do? They rely on something outside of them to make that emotion go away. So whether it's the masturbation or the pornography or the gambling or the shopping or the sugar or the whatever, it's all because they're trying to make that feeling go away, and they're using something outside of them. So then there is some emotion that the person, 75 to 90% of every person that goes to a healthcare facility in the Western world goes in because of psychological or emotional stress. That's 8 or 9 out of 10. And emotional stress and psychological stress are the ones that tend to be the most harmful. Because if it's not T-Rex that's chasing you, but it's your coworker in the next cubicle, what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. And the rush of those adrenal hormones become kind of addictive to people. And they use the problems, they use the conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need their enemy to feel hatred. And if their enemy died, they'd still feel hatred. People become addicted to the life they don't even like. And so if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, by thinking about your problems, and that's the truth, you can become addicted to your own thoughts. Those familiar emotions, the body starts signaling the brain, of memories, craves certain experiences just to feel that same emotion. And many people will tell the story of why they feel that way based on some past experience. And it's usually not in the recent past, it's usually many years ago.
Like a toxic relationship.
But I asked the year because it was that long ago that you would treat me that way and speak to me that way and just discard people. It was so long ago.
And they'll tell the story of that past. And in psychology, the latest research on memory shows that 50% of that story isn't even the truth. They're making it up.
If that's my memory, that something happened.
I think that neuroimaging is an elegant tool. And we still haven't really we're still not able to adequately use this tool as the gold standard for diagnosis following brain injury. So most people who sustain a mild TBI still have normal neuroimaging. The absence of positive neuroimaging findings is not equivalent to the absence of a brain injury.
I really want to emphasize that if you suspect a brain injury, it's really important to get a neuropsychological evaluation done. A neuropsychological evaluation is testing of memory, judgment, and concentration, reasoning skills, multitasking skills. It's the gold standard for assessing function of the brain. People tend to get MRIs and CT scans done, which are fine, but those are like looking at a blueprint. They tell you structurally, has there been an obvious structural change? But you can't tell looking at a blueprint, for example, if the air conditioning system's working unless you turn it on and off. You have to test how well it works. Neuropsychological testing tests how well the brain is working, regardless of how nice the blueprint looks.
Different aspects of alexithymia, and not everybody has all of those aspects. You can have one and not the other. So it comes out differently in people. So I kind of think about three main ways that I see it most often. You have your guy who basically has completely flat affect, that blunted affect, and that typical person that says, I don't feel emotions anymore, and they describe themselves as very emotionally disconnected. That is interesting because most people take that for face value, that there's no emotions there. They assume it's not there. But the issue is that there's a disconnect between the emotion and the experience. And we know this, so it's interesting because in one of what we were able to do one time, we had a guy come to us who was describing exactly this, and the wife was absolutely distraught because there was no kind of affection in their relationship anymore.
I'd like you to understand something. He wasn't always like he is now, David. When I first met him, he played so brilliantly. He was so intelligent and beautiful. So different from all the other English snobs. We were going to do wonderful things together. Useful things. Of course he was. A difficult man. Even then. But I thought I could turn to him. And the idea of turning to him now, of being alone in the same room with him.
So we wound up having him bring in items, personal items, like pictures of their wedding and pictures of their children, and even a piece of cloth with the wife's perfume on it. And we did an interview process. And while we were interviewing this guy, we actually hooked him up where we were able to see physiological responses to find out what was going on inside him. And as I'm interviewing him and showing him these really personal items, he had no outward response whatsoever. But internally, physiologically, his body was responding. So this was an indicator that something is going on, that there's just a disconnect between his brain and what's going on internally. So that's one way it can manifest itself. The other way, or one of the other ways it can manifest, is I like to give this example of a guy who was in one of our support group meetings, and something clearly agitated him. And the next thing you know, he's yelling, clenching fists, veins are popping, he jumps out of his chair, and everybody in the room is frightened and would say, relax. Why are you so angry? And he yells, I'm not angry. Why do you think I'm angry?
Autumn, hate to bother you, but we don't have any heat. Could you come take a look?
Try bleeding your radiators.
How would I go about that?
By bleeding the radiators.
Otto, don't be rude.
I wasn't being rude.
Well, it's hard to tell the difference sometimes with Otto.
Yeah. Why do you think I'm angry? Well, again, so there is this clear disconnect where it's affecting his behavior, and he has this complete lack of awareness of that experience and how it is affecting his behavior and how he's coming across. So, I think it's important to the message to communicate with that is that, these people are having emotions. It is going to impact how they behave and less likely to control it. And then the last way that we often see is, somebody could be well aware that they're having an emotional response, but they'll describe that emotional response as being flooded with their emotions. So like too much is coming in at once, and it's just a whole bunch of unpleasant noise.
Did you stop living like
Stop talking! Stop!
Okay! A whole bunch of unpleasant noise that they're experiencing, but they don't know exactly what it is. They don't know what they're feeling. They can't tell the difference between angry and sad and afraid, and it's just this jumbled mess that they don't know how to deal with. And so they might not be able to put labels or describe them. And so this type of person tends to just be angry. Anger is one of the most commonly expressed emotions in alexithymia. We will typically see, or you'll hear reports of people, he has two emotions. He has two emotions, nothing or anger.
What? What do you want?
What are you doing here?
What are you doing?
I'm looking for you.
Well, you found me.
What do you mean, did I find anything? You just asked me 2 seconds ago. I just came up with your charge the phone.
This is really, really common in alexithymia. People with alexithymia, they tend to know they're angry.
but that's about the extent of it. All of the other emotions are just overshadowed, and that's all they know how to express. And they don't know how to control it.
They can see that there's a difference in their face, but they don't always know the word for what they're seeing. So might overinterpret, like say they might think someone doesn't like them.
She's got that face. Harry warned me about that face. He told me his biggest regret was not knowing what that face meant till it was too late.
Emotional reasoning drives many of these stories. Emotional reasoning is a thinking pattern called a cognitive distortion, where your mind tells you that your emotions reflect reality. Even though your emotions can inform you about the situation and how you should respond, they're not always reliable. Examples of emotional reasoning are, I feel scared, so I must be in danger. Or I feel guilty, so I must have done something wrong. But sometimes these are just free-floating emotions that pop into your mind, triggered by an unconscious thought based on something from the past. If that's the case, you can misinterpret your current situation based on an emotion that's unrelated. So another way to process some of these negative stories is to engage in self-soothing activities so that you can generate some positive emotions. The positive emotions may help you stop ruminating on your negative story. A couple of examples of coping statements are, my past doesn't define me. My emotion does not reflect my reality.